I want you to try a little thought experiment with me. Imagine trying to capture the exact feeling of like a really vivid memory. Think about the physical temperature of the room you were in, the specific comforting tone of a loved one's voice, maybe the faint smell of coffee in the background, and that sudden rushing feeling of deep safety.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a lot to hold on to.
Right. You have all of that perfectly held in your mind. It is a complete indivisible moment. Now imagine someone walks up to you with a clipboard and forces you to reduce that entire rich, multisensory experience into a simple binary yes or no.
I mean, it feels like an impossible demand. If you're forced to distill an entire lived environment into a single checkbox,
Yeah.
you lose the essence of what actually happened. The context, the emotion, the reality of the moment simply vanishes.
It's an extraction. But what if our entire modern world, from our computer networks to, our educational systems and our medical diagnostics, is absolutely obsessed with making us do exactly that?
And that really gets to the heart of what we're looking at today.
Exactly. That is the core of today's deep dive. We are exploring a profoundly eye-opening article. It's titled Before the Switch: Logic, Language, and the Gestalt Whole by Dr. Jaime Hoerricks, and we're looking at it from her Substack, The Outside.
It's just a paradigm-shifting piece of writing because it challenges the very foundation of how we assume communication works. I mean, it forces us to look at the invisible infrastructure of our daily interactions.
So here is our mission for this deep dive. We are going to trace the history of modern logic, uncover how it has accidentally hijacked our understanding of human communication, and then we're going to explore the sheer beauty of language that arrives whole.
Which is such a beautiful concept.
It really is. And we are doing all of this to give you a completely new lens for understanding the way we speak to one another and, well, maybe more importantly, how we listen. Okay, let's unpack this. We have to begin by understanding the stakes.
Right, because the stakes are incredibly high here. The way we categorize language ultimately dictates how we categorize people. When society only values language that can be, chopped up, analyzed, and sorted into neat little columns, we end up marginalizing anyone whose mind doesn't work like a filing cabinet. We build institutions that reward a very specific type of mental sorting while actively punishing others.
To really understand how we currently judge language, we have to take a trip back to the 19th century and look closely at the tool we use to do the judging. We're talking about George Boole.
Ah, yes, George Boole.
Now, Dr. Hoerricks makes a very specific point right off the bat, which I love. Boole is not the villain of this story. He was a self-taught mathematician from Lincoln in the UK, operating entirely outside the elite academic channels of his time. He literally taught himself through sheer private labor.
He was a fascinating historical figure, truly. I mean, in 1854, Boole published a work called An Investigation of the Laws of Thought, and his grand project was to give human logic a mathematical form.
Right, because before that, it was mostly just philosophy.
Exactly. Before Boole, logic was the domain of philosophers. Boole wanted to handle propositions, statements that can be evaluated as strictly true or false, and show that human reasoning had an underlying calculable structure. So he created this algebraic system to symbolize relations like inclusion, exclusion, true, false.
Which is what we now call Boolean logic, which is, it's the absolute bedrock of the modern digital age. Every single piece of technology you interact with relies on this.
Every single one.
Yeah. A
Yep.
computer processor is essentially just millions of microscopic switches. They are either open or closed, passing current or not passing current. It's representing a 1 or a 0. That binary system is Boolean logic manifested in physical reality. It is the infrastructure that allows us to sort, route, and calculate at a massive global scale.
Right. Boolean logic gave engineers a way to translate abstract logical relations into literal electrical reality. So every search engine query, every database, every single algorithm filtering your social media feed, it all lives downstream from George Boole. It's an incredibly powerful mechanism for handling a proposition. But, and this is key, only after that proposition has been fully formed and stripped of its ambiguity.
Okay, let me try to put a visual on this. George Boole basically invented the cognitive equivalent of the shipping container.
Oh, like that.
The shipping container is a miracle of efficiency, right? It lets us move goods across the entire globe because every crane, every truck, and every port knows exactly how to handle that standardized metal box. You can stack them, route them, manifest them.
Exactly. It's universally understood by the system.
But if you try to stuff a living, breathing ecosystem like, say, a forest or a coral reef into a dark, standardized metal box just to make it easier to load onto a ship, something vital dies in the process. The complexity is destroyed for the sake of the sorting mechanism.
That is a perfect analogy. Boole built a phenomenal system for handling the boxes. But Dr. Hoerricks points out the fundamental danger that arose decades later. The tragedy begins when our institutions, so our schools, our diagnostic clinics, our administrative bureaucracies, mistake a mathematical tool designed for handling isolated propositions as a comprehensive theory of human thought itself.
Oh, man. So they assume that human thought naturally wants to be a shipping container.
Yes, they assume our brains naturally produce these perfectly clean, detachable statements.
But we don't.
We don't. But systems inherently crave clean divisions. Bureaucracies need individuals to be eligible or ineligible. Classrooms need behavior to be compliant or non-compliant. Diagnostics need a child to be verbal or nonverbal. The system wants a sentence it can score on a rubric and a person it can place into a neat little column.
It treats thought as if it naturally arrives already cooled down, cleanly separated, and ready to be judged as definitively true or false. I look at how deeply entrenched this is, and I just have to wonder how we fell into this trap. If Boolean logic relies on these clean, stripped-down propositions, why do we so easily assume human thought naturally arrives in that exact same clean format?
Well, according to the text, the answer actually lies in the language we are speaking right now. English.
Wait, really? English?
Yeah. Grammar is this hidden force that trains our attention. The structure of English makes this switch, this detachment of meaning into sortable binary pieces, feel entirely natural. It feels almost inevitable to native speakers.
The author points out that English sentences allow answers to flow completely free from the action of the moment. So if I ask you, did you eat lunch? You can just say yes.
Yes.
See? The word yes acts like a little detachable token. You can hand it over, totally independent of the food, the time, or the context. Furthermore, possession in English is centered entirely on the isolated self.
Right.
We say, I have a house, or I have a thought.
Right. The subject stands completely alone.
Yeah, acting as a sort of sovereign ruler over their objects.
And that linguistic habit perfectly primes the English-speaking mind for Boolean logic. We are culturally conditioned to lifting a proposition out of a complex event and evaluating it from the outside. And to show how arbitrary this is, Dr. Hoerricks contrasts this with the structure of Gàidhlig, the Celtic language of Scotland.
The contrast is completely wild to me. In Gàidhlig, the answer doesn't float free as a separate token. It re-enters the verb.
Right.
If you are asked a question, you don't say yes or no. You repeat the verb in the affirmative or negative. The answer participates in the action rather than standing apart from it.
It stays attached.
And possession is spatial and relational. A house is not possessed by me. The phrasing translates closer to the house is at me. The self isn't a sovereign ruler. The self is a coordinate in a much larger field of relation.
Which is such a profoundly different way to orient yourself in the world.
It is. But wait, so are we saying English is somehow a bad or cold language? Because I'm looking at this English example, and I can't help but think of Shakespeare or Keats or Toni Morrison. English isn't inherently devoid of emotion. It feels a little harsh to paint the entire language as a rigid filing cabinet.
Oh, for sure. And Dr. Hoerricks is very careful with this distinction. No language is innocent, and no language is purely one thing. English obviously carries lullabies, devastating poetry, and profound emotional depth. The argument is not that English is a moral failure.
Okay, good.
The point is about how grammar trains attention on a systemic level. Because it is grammatically easy in English to detach an answer from its context, powerful institutions have built automated administrative gates around those detachments. And when the state can easily sort those detached answers into a database, it labels that detachment clarity.
Wow. The state calls it clarity, but it's really just extraction.
Precisely.
Okay, so if human language doesn't fundamentally have to begin as a detachable proposition, like if it doesn't have to be a shipping container, how does it actually begin for minds that don't fit that Boolean mold? Here's where it gets really interesting. This brings us to Gestalt language processing.
Yes. And this is particularly relevant when we talk about neurodivergent individuals, especially autistic children. This is the core paradigm shift of the article. For a Gestalt language processor, the earliest unit of communication isn't a single word. It might not even be a standard sentence. The earliest unit is the entire unbroken event, meaning arrives embedded within the whole experience.
The text uses this incredible phrase, language arrives with its weather still attached.
The weather. I love that term. The weather is everything surrounding the auditory input. When a Gestalt processor acquires a phrase, they aren't memorizing the dictionary definition of the individual words. They are taking in the tone of voice, the rhythm of the speech, the physical pressure of the room.
The feeling of safety or panic in their own body?
Exactly. And the memory of what consequence followed those words. The phrase is stored as a preserved relational field.
This completely flips how we usually think about childhood language development. The standard model, the analytic model, which our schools are entirely built on, is a bottom-up assembly line.
Right.
We expect a child to first learn individual words like ball or red. Then we expect them to build phrases, red ball. Then sentences, I want the red ball. Meaning is constructed piece by piece.
But the Gestalt developmental model operates in the exact opposite direction. It is whole to part. It is a process of differentiation, not assembly. It starts with a massive meaning field, which becomes a highly charged utterance.
Right.
The individual might repeat a whole phrase or a chunk of dialogue. Over time, as they process it, they soften it into a variation. And only much later, when their environment feels completely safe, does that chunk break down into flexible, recombinable parts.
Let's ground this in a real-world scenario. A teacher or a parent might hear an autistic child repeating a single line from a movie over and over. Say, a line from Shrek or some cartoon. The clinical term for this is often echolalia, or scripting.
Yes, very common terms.
And the analytic adult in the room assumes the child is just playing around, or worse, that they are stuck in a loop of meaningless repetition. But through the lens of Gestalt processing, they aren't talking about the movie at all, are they?
No, not at all. They are using that specific line because the emotional weather of that movie scene matches the tension or the need they are feeling in that exact moment in the classroom. They are using that script as a structural bridge to regulate their nervous system.
We constantly misinterpret these moments because an analytic listener is just sitting there waiting for detachable tokens.
Exactly. When a child uses a script, the adult dismisses it as unoriginal or unspontaneous. They think the child is failing to communicate. But a Gestalt processor isn't failing to assemble words. They are actively holding an entire emotional experience intact. A script isn't a failed attempt at an original sentence.
It's a preserved route through sensory overwhelm.
Yes, it is an architecture they are using to survive a demanding moment.
I picture it like the child is holding an entire snow globe of a memory. The glass, the water, the little scene inside, the glitter, it's all one inseparable thing keeping them grounded. Meanwhile, the adults in the room are getting frustrated, demanding the child shatter the glass and just hand them a single piece of glitter so it can be graded on a worksheet.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. But it's exactly what happens. The child is holding the whole, desperately waiting for the environment to become secure enough for them to eventually loosen their grip and release the individual parts. But our Boolean systems are incredibly impatient.
And that impatience leads to profound harm. When we understand this whole-to-part development, we suddenly see the immense, often invisible damage inflicted by educational and diagnostic systems that demand immediate Boolean compliance. Dr. Hoerricks refers to this violence as premature segmentation.
Premature segmentation is an extraction by force. When well-meaning therapists or educators say, use your words, or tell me exactly what you mean, or say it properly, they are demanding the broken pieces before the whole is ready to be dismantled.
Right.
If a script is a shelter keeping a child regulated, demanding they break it down for the convenience of the adult, it's like tearing the roof off a house just to prove the child knows what shingles are.
It's forcing the switch before the living thing is ready. And Dr. Hoerricks draws a fascinating parallel here to queer history. And just to be clear for the listener, we are exploring her framework here to impartially understand her larger point about how society classifies human beings. We aren't taking sides, just looking at her argument, but she argues that queer communities understand the danger of this premature sorting intimately.
Her argument centers on the violence of administrative categorization. She points out that being forced into rigid, binary categories, male or female, normal or disordered, legible or suspect, often happens before a person has actually been allowed to fully appear or even understand themselves.
Yeah. The system demands a checkbox before the human being has finished forming their own meaning.
Precisely.
A category can certainly be a shelter, but usually only if it comes after you've recognized yourself and chosen it. Dr. Hoerricks' point is that it becomes a form of violence when the system demands the label first. When the administrative truth, the Boolean requirement, is prioritized over the lived embodied truth. According to her text, both queer individuals and Gestalt language processors suffer immensely when they are forced to segment their identities or their language into categories before the whole has been permitted to exist in the room.
It's a really powerful parallel, because in both cases, the system's need to sort is taking precedence over the human being's need to simply exist and develop.
Hearing all the mechanics of this, I keep coming back to the practical reality of a classroom or a living room. So, what are teachers, parents, or therapists actually supposed to do? If we realize that demanding the pieces is harmful and we shouldn't force the segmentation, how do we help a child communicate?
The author provides a very distinct alternative to the Boolean demand. You don't demand the parts, you honor the whole. The route to linguistic flexibility isn't extraction. The route is attunement.
Attunement.
Yes. When a child offers a script, you don't correct it. You listen for the weather of the phrase. You ask yourself as the listener, where did this phrase live before? What emotional state does it protect? What overwhelming transition is this script trying to soften?
So you make the environment safe enough so the script can loosen organically from within, rather than trying to pry it open with an administrative crowbar from the outside?
Exactly. You model language alongside them without demanding repetition. You vary your own language gently. You let the whole remain alive long enough that the individual finally trusts the world around them. Only then will they voluntarily release the pieces.
It is a completely different way of sharing space with another human being. It requires an entirely different kind of patience. Bringing all of these threads together, the core thesis of this deep dive is a massive reframing of how we interact. George Boole was a genius. His mathematics changed the trajectory of human history, but his logic begins too late in the human process.
That's the crux of it. Boolean logic can only evaluate a sentence after the extraction has already happened. It sits at the end of the line, evaluating the true or false value of the fragmented pieces. Gestalt processing, however, stays with the language before the extraction. It operates on the reality that human meaning begins warm, deeply attached to its environment, and completely whole.
And before a thought can be evaluated as true or false, it has to become survivable.
A proposition is completely useless to someone who is currently using language just to survive the sensory input of the room.
This leaves me with a final, lingering thought. We've traced how Boolean logic became the invisible infrastructure of our digital age. Our algorithms, our artificial intelligence models, our endless social media feeds, they are all built entirely on the mathematical logic of the switch. The 1 and the 0, the true and the false, the like and the dislike.
Right.
If that is the water we are swimming in every single day, is it possible that our technology is actively training all of us to lose our own weather? Are we destined to keep trying to slice our messy, complex, deeply relational human lives into cold, sortable digital boxes? Or can we ever figure out how to build digital spaces that actually honor the whole before the switch is flipped?
It really is the defining design question of our era. If we only build systems that recognize the extracted parts, we will eventually forget how to recognize the whole in each other.
Something for all of you to mull over today. Next time you catch a scent in the air that brings back a sudden flood of memories, or you hear a snippet of a song that transports you back to a specific room with a specific person, just notice how perfectly unbroken that feeling is. Notice the weather attached to it. Hold on to the whole for a second before you let the world sort it. Keep your curiosity alive, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.